This news update covers a continuation of Simon Ekpa's trial, focusing on a dramatic and unexpected court session where 3 members of the indigenous people of Biafra, ipob, appeared as surprise witnesses against Simon Ekpa. Contrary to expectations, the 3 ipob members came to testify against Simon Ekpa, not in his favor. This stunned observers and intensified courtroom tension. The prosecuting lawyer introduced the ipob witnesses, claiming they would offer direct evidence of Simon Ekpa's involvement in inciting violence and orchestrating unrest, despite being part of the same group. Simon Ekpa's lawyer immediately objected, arguing that the ipob is classified as a terrorist group by the Nigerian government, and therefore its members should not be considered credible or impartial witnesses. The presiding judge questioned how ipob members were able to travel abroad freely and sought clarification on their legal status. The prosecution argued they left Nigeria before ipob was designated a terrorist group in 2017. A detailed exchange followed between the prosecution and defense over the legitimacy, credibility, and potential biases of the ipob witnesses, focusing on their continued affiliation with the group and national security concerns. After considering both sides, the judge ruled that the ipob witnesses could testify, but under strict conditions, ensuring their statements would be thoroughly cross-examined for credibility and bias. The first witness described Simon Ekpa as the Prime Minister of ipob, accusing him of using a secret communication network to issue orders that led to violence, unrest, and economic disruption in Nigeria. The witness insisted Simon Ekpa is the de facto leader of ipob, giving sit-at-home orders that paralyzed regions of Nigeria, and claimed Simon Ekpa's denial of leadership in court is a betrayal of the movement. The prosecution began cross-examining the ipob witness, who reiterated Simon Ekpa's leadership role and influence within ipob, claiming his actions were directly linked to civil unrest, though he acknowledged other possible contributing factors. A witness, while affirming loyalty to the ipob cause, testified that Simon Ekpa is undeniably a leader in the group, stating he has seen Simon Ekpa lead and make decisions. The witness also said Simon Ekpa would be lying if he denied his leadership. Simon Ekpa asked the judge for permission to cross-examine the witness, claiming the testimony included inaccuracies and misrepresentations. He wanted to clarify the nature of his relationship with the witness and challenge the claims about directives he allegedly gave. During questioning, Simon Ekpa challenged the witness's definition of leadership, asked for concrete evidence of directives, and questioned the attribution of unrest to his actions. The witness maintained Simon Ekpa's orders were influential, particularly referencing sit-at-home directives linked to violence. Simon Ekpa pointed out that other leaders exist in ipob and questioned how he could be held solely responsible. The witness insisted Simon Ekpa had the most significant influence and directed major activities of the group. A second ipob member testified and presented printed tweets and documents from Simon Ekpa's account, dating from 2021 to the present. These materials were described as controversial and potentially damaging, marking a turning point in the trial. It was a chilly, grey morning in Helsinki, the capital city of Finland. The sky was heavy with clouds, as if mirroring the tension building inside the courtroom of the Helsinki District Court. People who had gathered around the court building could sense that something unusual was about to unfold. There was a palpable energy in the air, thick with anticipation and confusion. What started as just another day in the continuation of Simon Nyoku Ekpa's legal proceedings soon turned into a moment of high drama that shocked even the most seasoned observers. Simon Nyoku Ekpa, a Nigerian-born political activist who has become a controversial figure due to his role within the indigenous people of Biafra, also known as ipob, was in court for a crucial session of his ongoing trial. The case, which had already attracted attention in both Finland and Nigeria, had been moving slowly but steadily. Finnish authorities were scrutinizing allegations that Simon Nyoku Ekpa, from his residence in Lahti, Finland, had been involved in instigating unrest and violence in southeastern Nigeria. He had been accused of issuing inflammatory commands and sit-at-home orders from abroad, which allegedly contributed to the breakdown of civil peace in some parts of Nigeria. His defense team had consistently maintained that he was merely expressing his political beliefs and that the accusations were politically motivated. On this particular day, however, the rhythm of the court proceedings was disrupted in a manner nobody had expected. As journalists, legal professionals, and observers settled into their seats, 3 unknown men entered the court premises under the watchful eyes of Finnish security officers. The atmosphere changed immediately. The men were later identified as members of the indigenous people of Biafra, the very same organization that Simon Nyoku Ekpa is accused of leading and representing. What shocked everyone in the room was that these individuals were not present to support him, as many might have assumed. They were not there as allies or defenders of his actions. Rather, they had been called in as surprise witnesses by the prosecution to testify against him. Their appearance and the direction their testimony took changed the entire tone of the trial. The lead prosecuting attorney, a tall Finnish man named Petteri Laaksonen, introduced the witnesses with a measured but serious tone. He said they would provide first-hand evidence linking Simon Nyoku Ekpa to specific acts of violence and civil disobedience in Nigeria. Their testimony, he added, would demonstrate how Simon Nyoku Ekpa allegedly used his position within the indigenous people of Biafra to incite unrest and economic paralysis back in his home country, despite residing comfortably in Finland. The courtroom fell into a stunned silence. This development caught the defense team completely off guard. Simon Nyoku Ekpa's Finnish lawyer, a meticulous and sharp-witted woman named Emilia Harjunen, immediately stood up to object. She questioned the credibility of the witnesses, citing the fact that the indigenous people of Biafra is designated as a terrorist group by the Nigerian government. If the group is considered a terrorist organization, she argued, how could members of such an organization be allowed to give testimony in a Finnish court and be considered impartial? Judge Kari Haavisto, a calm but authoritative figure presiding over the case, raised an eyebrow and asked a very pointed question. How did these men, who are known members of the indigenous people of Biafra, manage to leave Nigeria and enter Finland without any legal obstructions? And what was their legal status in Finland? Were they here as asylum seekers? Had they renounced their affiliation with the group, or were they still active members? The prosecution responded with a layered explanation. According to their investigation, the 3 men had left Nigeria years ago, some of them even before the indigenous people of Biafra was officially declared a terrorist group in 2017. Therefore, they were not legally culpable for being members at the time of their departure. Moreover, they were now cooperating with law enforcement and had provided useful information, which the prosecutors argued justified their inclusion in the witness list. A long and detailed legal back and forth ensued between the prosecution and the defense. The two sides argued passionately about the implications of allowing members of the indigenous people of Biafra to testify in a court of law in Finland. The defense highlighted the risk of bias, suggesting that the witnesses might have personal vendettas or ulterior motives. The prosecution countered by emphasizing the value of their direct knowledge and experiences, which could provide clarity on Simon Nyoku Ekpa's alleged role in the unrest in Nigeria. Eventually, after a short recess and some careful consideration, Judge Kari Havisto ruled that the witnesses could testify, but their credibility and motivations would be rigorously examined under cross-examination. The judge insisted that their testimony would not be accepted at face value and must stand up to intense scrutiny. The first witness, a middle-aged man with a thin build and sharp features, took the stand. Speaking through a translator, he began by describing Simon Nyoku Ekpa as the Prime Minister of the indigenous people of Biafra. He claimed that Simon Nyoku Ekpa had operated a secret communication network through which he issued orders to followers in Nigeria. These orders, he said, had a direct and disruptive impact on daily life in southeastern Nigeria, particularly through the now infamous sit-at-home directives. According to him, Simon Nyoku Ekpa's instructions led to the closure of markets, schools and businesses, severely affecting the region's economy and causing widespread hardship. The witness went further to say that Simon Nyoku Ekpa was not just a spokesperson or a figurehead. He insisted that Simon Nyoku Ekpa was the de facto leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, even if he denied such in court. This, the witness argued, amounted to a betrayal of the group and its cause. His testimony was delivered with both sadness and bitterness. It was as if he felt personally let down by Simon Nyoku Ekpa. As the courtroom absorbed this surprising revelation, the defense team began their cross-examination. Simon Nyoku Ekpa himself requested to address the witness directly. After obtaining permission from the judge, he approached the stand. He was calm, but his voice carried a quiet intensity. He began by challenging the witness's definition of leadership. He asked the man to provide specific examples of directives he had allegedly given. He wanted to know if there were audio recordings, written instructions, or other forms of evidence to prove that he had orchestrated any of the events described. The witness remained firm. He claimed that Simon Nyoku Ekpa's influence was undeniable. He said that Simon Nyoku Ekpa's voice, his social media posts, and his broadcasts were enough to mobilize thousands. He insisted that Simon Nyoku Ekpa's instructions were seen as commands by many followers of the indigenous people of Biafra. He said he had personally observed how Simon Nyoku Ekpa made decisions, issued statements, and handled internal disputes within the movement. When Simon Nyoku Ekpa tried to distance himself from being the sole leader, the witness retorted that although there were others in the hierarchy, no one else had his reach or authority. The second witness took the stand shortly after. He was younger, more composed, and carried a thick stack of documents with him. As he was sworn in, everyone leaned forward slightly. This witness presented printed screenshots of tweets, social media posts, and other materials allegedly from Simon Nyoku Ekpa's verified accounts, dating from the year 2021 to the present. He highlighted specific posts that he claimed were not only provocative, but dangerous. Some of these messages, he said, had led to spontaneous protests, clashes with law enforcement, and shutdowns in Nigerian cities. These materials, which were later submitted into evidence, marked a critical turning point in the trial. Finnish authorities, who had thus far relied heavily on statements and circumstantial evidence, now had printed documentation that could be examined line by line. The prosecution emphasized that these tweets, when read in context, showed a pattern of deliberate provocation and coordination. Once again, Simon Nyoku Ekpa stood to defend himself. He pointed out that social media is a tool used by millions to express political beliefs. He asked how one could distinguish between speech protected by freedom of expression and speech that crosses the line into incitement. He said many of his posts were taken out of context and that they reflected his belief in self-determination and human rights, not violence. However, the second witness maintained his position. He said that while political speech is protected, leadership comes with responsibility. He argued that someone as influential as Simon Nyoku Ekpa could not simply claim innocence when his followers acted violently in response to his words. By the end of the session, the courtroom was emotionally charged. Outside, reporters tried to make sense of what they had just witnessed. A trial that was expected to proceed with routine deliberations had turned into a drama of conflicting loyalties, bitter accusations, and hard evidence. The image of Simon Nyoku Ekpa as a freedom fighter or political dissident was now under question. The surprise testimony of members of his own group raised troubling questions about his role and intentions. The next session of the trial was scheduled for the following week, and everyone knew that what would come next could determine the future not only of Simon Nyoku Ekpa, but also of how Finland deals with politically sensitive cases involving foreign nationals. This was no longer just a legal matter. It had become a global story involving questions about freedom, leadership, political responsibility, and the power of words spoken from far away to influence events on the ground. The Finnish court, known for its professionalism and strict adherence to due process, now faced the difficult task of untangling truth from loyalty, political belief from criminal intent, and passion from manipulation. For Simon Nyoku Ekpa, the road ahead looked uncertain. For the observers inside and outside the courtroom, one thing was clear. This trial was not just about one man. It was about the future of how democracies like Finland respond to the complex challenges of global activism, transnational justice, and political accountability. As the court adjourned that tense session, there was no mistaking the significance of what had just transpired. The storm that had brewed inside the Helsinki District Court was far from over. In fact, many observers believed it had only just begun. While Simon Nyoku Ekpa walked slowly out of the courtroom, flanked by his legal counsel and followed by curious eyes, the news had already begun to spread beyond the walls of the courthouse. International media outlets picked up the story. Nigerian media stations, diaspora groups, and human rights observers began dissecting every word of the witnesses' testimonies. Online platforms erupted in debates about loyalty, betrayal, justice, and truth. Some saw the witnesses as heroes speaking the truth in difficult times. Others saw them as traitors to a cause they once believed in. As the following days passed, the court prepared for the next stage of the proceedings. The Finnish judicial system is known for being methodical and rooted deeply in both procedural fairness and the careful examination of evidence. And in this case, both the evidence and the emotions surrounding it were becoming increasingly complex. Outside the court, the Finnish police had tightened security. The reason for this became clear when, on the morning of the next hearing, a small group of unidentified men tried to force their way through the crowd and enter the courthouse. The scene was chaotic. According to eyewitness accounts, 3 to 5 men dressed in black jackets moved swiftly through the gathered crowd and attempted to breach the perimeter set up by security. It is still unclear whether their purpose was to disrupt the hearing, protect Simon Nyoku Ekpa, or confront the witnesses who had testified against him. What is certain, however, is that their actions triggered immediate concern for the safety of everyone involved in the trial, especially the legal teams and the judge. The security personnel reacted quickly. The court premises were locked down, and the unidentified individuals were restrained and escorted away for questioning. At the time of reporting, Finnish authorities had not confirmed the identity or nationality of the intruders. However, speculation ran rampant. Some believed the men were supporters of Simon Nyoku Ekpa, who had become frustrated by the direction the trial was taking. Others suspected the involvement of external actors trying to silence the ipob witnesses, either to stop further testimony or to send a message. The trial had moved beyond legal arguments and into the realm of moral questions. Questions about what it means to lead, to protest, and to be accountable in a globalized world where words travel farther and faster than ever before. This is the end of our news update. Please click the icon on the top right corner of your screen to watch my next video. You will enjoy it. I will see you again in my next update. Enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye for now.